Well, hello, everybody. It's the Bob McCown podcast featuring yours truly and accompanied by expert sidekick John
What,
Shannon.
on the piano or what?
Can you play the piano?
No,
You play any musical instrument at all?
I was really good at the recorder for about 3 years.
You still have your recorder?
No.
Because I was about to tell you what to do with it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, have a nice day.
Did everybody have a recorder when they were young in our generation?
Sure, we had to take it in school.
I don't remember that, but I remember having one.
Oh yeah, had to take it in school, and you had to pay 50 cents for it.
Really? It
Yeah.
was plastic, wasn't it? It wasn't even wooden. It was plastic.
No, some were wood. Some you had a
Oh,
choice:
really?
plastic or wood. Yeah.
Well, I guess I went cheap. I got plastic. There's a memory I'd like to not bring back again. Steve Simmons is in Florida. Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun is in Florida. We're going to chat with him a little bit about, well, I know John wants to talk about the Olympics because Stevie was one of those guys who went to a whole bunch of Olympics and missed this one, maybe the first in a long time, being on vacation in Florida and the fact that it's Beijing and in a pandemic and whatever. So we'll talk a bit about that. And I got something I want to throw into the pod as well.
Oh, this should be fun.
Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun when we come back after these messages. It's the Bob McCown podcast. Yours truly, John Shannon, back with you. Steve Simmons has been lounging in Florida
in exile
for the past, I don't know, 6-8 months, something ridiculous, some length of time. Apparently his razor has failed to accompany him to Florida. Perhaps a trim would be in order, Simmons.
I am doing it when I get back to Toronto with my barber that I've been with for the last 25 years, who I trust to do this properly.
All right.
One of the magic things about being on vacation is not having to worry about shaving, Bob. Come on.
I was at a restaurant the other night, and a younger girl turns to me and asked me if I was related to Mandy Patinkin.
And did you tell her the truth?
I told her I wish I was.
Did you recite some lines from The Princess Bride? Come on now.
No, but I was going to give a little homeland
Oh.
to her.
See, that tells the difference between your lifestyle and mine. You liked Homeland, and I liked The Princess Bride, Steve.
I like both.
I don't like either. So to hell with both of you.
Oh, The Princess Bride, Bob?
Couldn't care less.
Oh, William Goldman novel. It was fantastic.
Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant. Sure.
As a wrestler, okay. As an actor, please.
Isn't it the same?
Excellent point, actually, now that I think of it. I know Shannon wants to go a particular direction with this conversation, but of course I'm going to hijack it right off the top.
Oh.
And for this reason, MLS season begins, I think, this weekend coming.
Hold on, just a minute.
I know.
Just a minute. What is going on here? We're talking. We're changing the topic, and you bring up the MLS.
Soccer. Yeah. Well, and from this perspective, not that I could care less about about MLS, but we just went through this string of international soccer matches, the qualifications for the World Cup, that raised, I think, the awareness and interest in the sport to a level heretofore not seen in this country. And I think although I haven't seen numbers, I think probably by a dramatic number. And the question that I started to ponder was, well, what impact would this have on MLS and the various Canadian teams in that league? Understanding that once March comes around and Canada gets an opportunity to clinch their berth in the World Cup, we'll have a big audience once again. But will there be, have we caught the flu, the soccer flu? What do you think, Simmons?
Well, I think for 30 years, we've been hearing that soccer is the sport of the future in Canada, and I think it's finally arrived. And by that, I don't mean MLS soccer. I mean international soccer and World Cup soccer and Team Canada soccer. And what we've seen are people who otherwise would not be paying any attention to soccer. And I may be one of those people who are quite interested in what's going on and are attracted to what's going on. And I think for the first time in many of our lives, there's a reason to care about Canadian soccer. And it's kind of fun to have a new sport on the agenda when for most of our lives, there was no reason to care.
Well, I don't disagree with you in any way. Here's the intriguing thing. I'm flipping the dial around last night, and on TSN, they showed a replay of, I think it was the 2016 TFC game against Montreal, the one that ended, was a 2-game total goal that allowed TFC to get into their first championship game. And it was wild. It wound up, the 2-game total wound up 7-5 for TFC. They won the game, the second game 5-2 after being down 1-0. I actually watched most of it. What
has happened to you?
I don't know.
What has happened to you?
Something very unusual and concerning.
Have you moved to the?
You could have turned
the suburbs or something.
I watched a soccer game that was 6 years old, which of course I didn't watch originally because I had no interest back then, and I just don't know whether I have any interest now. But I'm sitting there watching this, and it occurred to me, like, would I be doing this if I hadn't been watching all of those, CONCACAF qualification matches? And I think the answer is no.
Well, let me ask you something, Bob. When you look at the Canadian roster, when you look at all those players, do you know where they play?
Not a clue.
So the answer is it won't have any. I agree with you, and I only care if they play for Canada.
Well, one of the interesting things about MLS in Toronto, for example, is that they have their audience. It's a very active, very verbal, very excited group. Hardcore. They go to games. The attendance is very strong, and TV numbers are terrible. MLS in Canada does not do very good. It does not do very well on television. But those soccer games recently, those Canadian soccer games, were doing over 1 million, which is as big as John would know better than we would. 1 million people is a huge Canadian sporting audience, and there's a huge difference, I think, between. It's like the World Junior in hockey. People don't watch junior hockey on a regular basis throughout the season, but everybody tunes in for the World Juniors. And I think it's the same thing with soccer at the world level. Now that there's an Alphonso Davies and there's a David and there's guys you can look at and say, boy, they can play this game.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison. We always tend to wrap ourselves in the flag. And we can do it for a couple of weeks. We can do it for a couple of nights. But if you then go and try to watch, for instance, as you talked about junior hockey that's now on TSN, they don't get more than 50,000 viewers across the country for a single game on a Friday night. Whereas if the World Junior was on that Friday night and they said this is World Junior Canada versus Slovakia, they might get 500,000 or 600,000 viewers. It's a phenomenon.
I'll accept that, but I think we all three of us know that it's very difficult to watch a sporting event if you don't have a rooting interest. I mean, we don't watch just generically because it's entertaining. We watch because we care about the outcome. Mm-hmm. And with junior hockey, you're talking about, generally speaking, small markets across this country.
Yeah.
So if Lethbridge is playing Moose Jaw, who outside of Lethbridge and Moose Jaw is likely to be interested in that game? A few people, but not enough. We are now talking about a sport in soccer where the teams in MLS, the Canadian teams in MLS, are in the biggest cities, only in the biggest cities in this country. And I wonder whether there would be some, I don't know, Toronto's such a weird place in terms of fan base that you don't know what it would do for TFC, but in a place like Vancouver.
Let me ask the two of you this question.
Yeah.
Name 2 players on the Vancouver soccer team.
I can't.
I can't either. And I make my living in this business.
I can't name one.
How about any other team in Montreal? Do we know
Can't.
anybody? That's the problem.
Yeah.
We don't care about MLS day to day. We tend to care in Toronto. You tend to care about your team because they're your team, and you knew who the stars of that team were or are. They've just changed most of them, and so you have something of an interest. But I remember one year, the All-Star game, I believe in MLS, was being played on the same day that Toronto FC was playing one of those international friendlies. I'm thinking, what sport would do this? Like, no one cared to watch the All-Star game because, frankly, who cares? And that's the way we tend to view leagues that aren't the NHL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. And even in those leagues, I think you tend to be very local to start with, but at least there's reasons to watch the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox or whomever else you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not arguing your theory, Simmons, and or yours, Shannon, but I just wonder if there's no way an MLS game, other than a championship game. Does anybody remember what the two championship games that TFC played in, what they drew?
They did pretty well.
They drew about 1 million people. They did. They drew, but there was a ton of momentum over a 3-week period that pushed Toronto, and they played the same team twice in playing Seattle, and there was some momentum when it came to the playoffs and for MLS that year. Absolutely.
I just wonder whether you got 1 million people, probably 10 times what you would get for an MLS game, have been watching Team Canada play. Many of them are not big soccer fans like me, and maybe some level of attraction takes place beyond recognizing the players, beyond the fact that, that Davis and Davies are both playing in Europe. You're not going to see them very often. They're certainly not going to play in MLS at any point in the near future, but maybe just an awareness of the game. Hockey has gone through this in the United States for years and years and years. And the premise was, if you show people hockey, they'll fall in love with it. Well, a lot of people who wouldn't watch soccer have now watched soccer. Will they fall in love with it?
There's a couple of things. First of all, Alphonso Davies has already played in MLS. He played for the Whitecaps.
Yeah, he was 17 years old, though.
That's right. Well, what is
and
he now?
Didn't. He was a Canadian kid who looked like he had a great future.
Yeah.
But the stamp had not been placed on him.
Right.
He hadn't had any success. He hadn't been verified as a star until he went to Europe and now in the World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. I mean, I think there's a couple of things at play here. First of all, how many people paid attention after that single great play in the Panama game? How many people paid attention? That was one of those plays that he scored that goal that transcended the hardcore soccer fan. It was seen we're seen all over the world.
Sure.
It was such a remark. And so that attracted a lot more people of our ilk, Bob, that aren't they watching soccer every Saturday and Sunday morning and on a Tuesday night. Knowing all the different leagues around the world. That's the one thing. The other part is, and Steve, you can jump in here. One of the other issues is MLS has no vested interest in the promotion of Canada's national team because the rights are owned by another group, and Soccer Canada has aligned itself with another group. The Premier Soccer League, the one that's run and owned out of Hamilton. So there's still divergent agendas in the world of soccer in our country. MLS is certainly happy that Canada is performing well, but they don't have as much of a vested interest in all of this that, say, the people who own the rights do, and the One Soccer, the soccer network that's online right now and hoping to get cable penetration. So it's fascinating to see how everything has gone. But there isn't one group that is pushing soccer 100% of the time. And I think that there's probably divergent opinions on that.
We tend to forget how small a country we are. we sit opposite the United States, which is such a large country, and you forget that Canada is this small, somewhat insecure country. And we like nothing better, I don't care what the sport is, to wrap ourselves around the flag. What brings, the East Coast and the West Coast and the French and the English and all the different, groups in Canada together? Canadian success at World Juniors, in international sport, Olympic Games, soccer. There was nothing like the Vancouver Olympics to watch how Canadians just grew into enjoying and celebrating success. And I think ever since 2010, I think we changed as a sporting country. And now we're seeing it, the change happening in soccer, because people who aren't, the same people who don't care about downhill skiing or moguls or bobsled or whatever it is at the Winter Olympics that they were winning medals in Vancouver in, that got excited about it, are a lot of the same people who are now getting excited about soccer and wouldn't be able to tell you, 5 players on their local teams.
Well, look, I don't have a hard position on it. I'm just intrigued by anytime you see a dramatic change in viewership, which relates to interest in any sport. Is it translatable? Is it transferable? Can it mean anything? And I don't pretend to know the answer to it. You two guys seem to think it means nothing, that it's an isolated incident, that will probably get 1 million people will watch the next Team Canada game, but the audience for TFC or Vancouver or whoever else probably won't be impacted at all, correct?
And we'll get great numbers.
Sorry, John, but I don't think it's any different than the Raptors when they won the NBA championship. When the Raptors won the title a few years back, the audiences were massive. And it wasn't just the audiences on television watching, it was those viewership parties across the country. I think they had 91 of them on the night they won the title. The average Raptors basketball game is still a bad TV number now. Yeah, and they were when they were trying to win, and they were after they won. So through that playoff season, they got enormous television numbers. But in between, they don't do very well on television. It's a mediocre TV product. Would you not agree, John?
The product? I think the product's fine.
No, not
but
the
I
product,
think
the amount of people watching in the country.
Oh yeah, no, you're going to get between 200 and 450,000 people on a good night for basketball. But you're right. I mean, there were 4 or 5 million that watched the championship. You brought something up.
Well, just a second, John. I don't want you to change the gears yet. Here's what should be pointed out, though. Before the Raptors went on that run, there were many nights where there were under 100,000 watching Raptors basketball.
Yeah.
So the numbers have gone up dramatically. Are they at hockey numbers right now? No. But they did improve.
They're okay. Yeah, they're okay.
Anyway,
you're right. They have to. Well, no, I wanted to go back to Steve's comment about how things changed in 2010. And we really do have to give a friend of ours some credit, and that's Keith Pelly, who ran the Olympic Television Consortium. And it was really, in many ways, in working with the Canadian Olympic Committee, it was Keith that pushed the agenda of we should be proud and we should brag more at these events. Up until then, there was always a television fairness doctrine. We've got to be fair. We've got to be right. We've got to be composed. We'll wave the flag at the appropriate time. Well, Keith didn't believe in that. Keith said, we'll wave the flag every day, 24 hours a day for 17 days. And it really did change our country in its viewing habits. And I think it really did change the attitude of viewers and fans of all those sports. And let's face it, some of the sports we don't really ever watch very often. But it did change an attitude. And I think that if you were to point at something, and you brought it up, Steve, the watershed moment that we all changed was the 2010 Vancouver Olympics.
And it wasn't just TV, it was being there. Because I was there, I presume you guys were there as well. The way that people were on the streets, the way they were walking around at venues, the way they were in the stands, it was a different Canada. Those 3 weeks were a different Canada, and I think it's played into What's happened since? And what did Canada do with the Raptors in celebration? What have they done now with the soccer team in celebration?
Well,
people are looking.
Even look at the Blue Jays. Even look for a generation. Look at the Blue Jays in 15 and 16.
Yeah.
And how the country rallied around the baseball team.
Well, and I think, in response to your point about Vancouver in 2010, I love Pelly, and I give him credit for what he did, because he changed the way Olympic Games are covered, certainly in this country, and who knows, maybe to some extent around the world, with multiple channels, multiple sources, and places you can go and watch. But at the end of the day, you can make the argument that if Canada hadn't had its best ever Olympics in Vancouver, would the audience have been the same? Look at it. What do we win? 12 gold medals? I can't even remember exactly how many.
Yeah.
But we were at the top of the food chain in Vancouver. We were the number one country. We were winning. We had medals coming in every day, and gold medals coming in every day. Now, we won a bunch of medals in Beijing last week, but only 4 gold.
Yeah.
What if our performance in Vancouver, what if the country's performance in Vancouver had been comparable to Beijing? Would there have been that sense of excitement? And I'm not talking, Steve, about what it was like on the streets, because it was spectacularly good. The best 2 weeks in terms of an event that I've ever been at. It was fun. It was friendly. It was like a never-ending party. But sitting at home, back in Toronto or wherever you happen to be and watching it, would the audience have been what it was if Canada had a typical Canadian Olympics with a few medals, way more silvers and bronzes than golds, and really wasn't in the competition on a daily basis? Because we had people who were competing for medals every 5 minutes in Vancouver.
The Calgary Olympics were fun. It was a fun event. But the Calgary Olympics was not
it was a disaster that way.
Yeah, Canadians didn't do very well. Number one, we didn't win very many medals. And number two, across the country, it didn't translate across the country the way Vancouver winning did. And Bob, you make perfect sense. If they had a Calgary performance in Vancouver, I suspect it would have changed a lot of what we now sort of take for granted and expect from Canadian athletes at Winter Games. I think we as Canadians, I don't mean the three of us, I mean we collectively, we get very excited by medals of any color. And to quote my old retired sports writer friend David Schultz, if you don't win a bronze medal, you lose a bronze medal, because you're third. 2 people beat you in that race. You shouldn't be celebrating the fact that 2 people beat you in that race. But him and I have a different perspective, but I find his view of that somewhat amusing.
Well, but you're right. The bar has changed. The expectation level has changed dramatically since Vancouver. Montreal in 76, we had to wait till the last day till Greg Joy finally won a silver. We went through our whole lifetime hoping Canadians would get to the podium. Did it matter whether it was gold, silver, or bronze? Only a little bit. We would like to have gold, prefer to have silver over bronze, but we'll take anything. Well, Vancouver changed all that. The expectations were much higher. I can tell you in what I watched of Beijing, I found Canadian athletes' performances to be disappointing. They won almost as many medals, but so many fewer gold.
Yeah.
See, I look at the Winter Olympics in two ways: performance-wise and entertainment-wise. And to me, the 2 best sports at the Winter Olympics to watch and to enjoy are hockey and figure skating. And because the men's hockey tournament was beyond dreadful, no disrespect, John.
No, it's okay.
It was.
I don't play.
Almost unwatchable. And the figure skating, it was more about controversy with the Russians than it was about any Canadian doing anything in any event. There wasn't a Kurt Browning, there wasn't an Elvis Stoico, there wasn't a Patrick Chan. There wasn't anybody there you could look at and say, this is the guy we're hoping for. I mean, that's what they do in the US. They take 5 or 6 athletes and they sell the heck out of them. And
That's
they build
right.
their entire, NBC builds its entire broadcast around, what's Michaela Schifrin going to do, or what's Chen going to do, or whomever. We don't do that the same way, but you still need those faces. You need those people. And you could have watched that Canadian hockey team play, the men's team, and say, I don't remember one guy doing anything that mattered. And you could watch the Canadian figure skaters and say, I don't remember anybody doing anything that mattered. And you would have come away disappointed in these Olympics. In my opinion, the other medals matter, but those ones matter more.
Which is why the women's hockey team became such a vital success story for Canada at the Olympics. And
it was the story.
I know.
It was the story a week before the Olympics, and it'll be the story 4 years from now.
Yeah.
It was the one thing that as much as possible, everybody was interested in. So
let me ask you to go full circle on your original question, which I'm in a little bit of shock about with soccer. So this team's going to qualify. Canada's going to qualify for the World Cup. It's going to go to Qatar, depending on what day and how you say it. What if they do exactly what we did in 1986 and play 3 games, don't score a goal, and go home? How do we view that then?
I doubt very much that happens, because they have some players of such a high caliber that I think they're going to be like the old Canadian boxer that you'd see, Mike Strange or one of these kind of guys that would go 3 tough rounds with someone and lose by 1 on the scorecard. And you say, boy, did he ever represent us well? And I think that's kind of what we're not going to get what happened in 80s. Well, in 86, they weren't even of the field. Like, I don't remember, did they have a scoring chance?
I think they had 1, but they didn't score.
Like, I mean, ask anyone who was there and they'll tell you, didn't win a game, didn't score a goal. That's the story. That's the narrative of Canada at the World Cup. Mm-hmm. This time you may not win a game. I suspect they'll be in some, and I suspect they'll score some goals. And that's coming from someone who knows absolutely nothing about soccer.
Well, and that's, if you look at this qualification, from an untrained eye, that's really the point of difference. I think you've identified it as they don't win ball possession. They aren't necessarily as good as the US or Mexico or any of the other countries in CONCACAF in terms of overall skill, but they know how to attack. They know how to score. They are dramatic as hell, or have been in doing it. And since they've been doing it over and over and over again, you have to think that's ingrained somehow in the personality of this team. So you'll go to Qatar, I think, with probably low expectations, but realistic possibilities. This team has magic, at least it does right now, and maybe it can pull off an upset or 2. Maybe it can get past the first round. I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility. Do you?
Before he coached the men's team, John Herdman coached the women's team.
Yes, he did.
National team. And I was at the bronze medal match in 2012 London Olympics.
Right.
And they played France. I don't think they touched the ball for about 90% of the game. Like, France just had the ball. I think the shots at goal, the weird soccer stat, were 18-3 when Diane Matheson scored late in that game to give Canada a 1-0 lead and a bronze medal. People all remember that she scored. People all remember they got a medal. I think it was their first time getting a medal. Herdman seems to be an expert at playing that kind of soccer, keeping them in the game, and then finding your moment. And the Canadian team, the women's team, did that in the summer. They didn't play terrifically well all the time in winning that gold medal, and yet they won the gold medal. And now the men's team's doing something somewhat similar.
They're very opportunistic.
Higher end talent, which really, I mean, we all know if you don't have those guys,
mm-hmm.
at the front in soccer, you don't have a chance.
We got to take the break. We're a little behind. We'll come back with more. Steve Simmons is with us on the Bob and Cowan podcast. Back after these messages. Welcome back. It's the Bob and Cowan podcast on your favorite podcast server or on Sirius XM channel 167.
You're very computer. You're talking soccer and you're talking computers today. It's unbelievable.
Things change, you know.
I thought
Did you
this
have
was
you must have had a good sleep.
I thought this was Friends with Conan O'Brien.
Having never listened to it, I couldn't tell you whether it has any similarities or not. Steve Simmons is with us. The two of them were basically engaged in a conversation about the Olympics. So I'll let John continue because you wanted to delve further into this.
I just wonder, and Steve's being a U.S. resident for the last little while, he got to watch the Olympics through the eyes of NBC, which is a totally different animal than watching it through the eyes of the CBC. I'm curious, are you concerned, or should you be concerned, or should we be concerned about where the Olympics are going? And I mean, have people lost interest in the Olympics? Or is this just the ebb and flow of what's going on in our world today?
I think there's a few factors involved. I think time zone is always a factor. When you don't have your events live in prime time, that's a problem, although NBC doesn't believe in live of anything. One of the nicest things about this Olympics being in the United States is you got something called Peacock, which gave you the ability to watch anything as it was happening on how many channels you had. So you could click on Olympics, click on schedule, see that Canada was playing somebody in curling and click on that and get it with, some broadcaster you do not know. It tends to be a sort of a middle of the road kind of, not from one country or another, host broadcaster. And so you could watch everything you wanted to watch. And me being a guy who hasn't missed a Winter Olympics since 1984, it was very odd to be watching it on television for the first time. And so it was kind of exciting to be flipping around on Peacock, but I found, the coverage on NBC was uninteresting to me because it really featured the same 4 or 5 athletes every day. And that's all they seem to talk about. And if those people aren't succeeding, I'll use Michaela Schifrin as a good example. I think she was in 5 events and was expected to come home with 2 or 3 medals and didn't come home with any, and almost broke down in tears, every second day. And so what are they selling? By the time primetime comes around, you already know that Michaela Schifrin's lost. So you're not going to tune in. I think the NBC's coverage was down 42% was the number I saw. I think that's to do with lack of gold medals, one, lack of their stars coming up big, lack of prime time because, with the 13-hour difference, that's a problem. And, and I think also the whole COVID, China, Beijing, Russia, drugs, all those things together did not make this to be a memorable Olympics for anything but terrible things.
Well, what's interesting too, essentially the Olympic Games were staged in Beijing in front of nobody. And under normal circumstances, if I turned the clock back 2.5 years, we would have a very fascinating conversation, which we did back then, about the prospect of sports on television, how it's going to be impacted by the fact that nobody's in the stands. And, we went through all the networks put sound effects in and did their best to make it seem like there were people there. But these are the Olympic Games. But on the other hand, have we not gotten used to watching sporting events with nobody in the stands? Does it impact us as much? Like how much was that a factor in the audience numbers being what they are?
I think it's a huge part of it. I really do. I think that, crowd and fans create energy. Energy on television creates excitement. Excitement on television means you tend to watch more. I really think that. I think that was something that we saw. By the way, two things. You could what you talked about Peacock, you could do in Canada with CBC Gem, exact same thing, Steve. And the other thing was that by the second week of the games, the Chinese were putting seat fillers in, and to make it look like there were crowds there. They were sitting in every second seat, but they never said a word. They never cheered. They just sat there. It was a staged audience for much of the second half of the Olympics, at least the venues that I was watching. And it was fascinating. You didn't notice there was a crowd because they never said a darn thing.
4 years ago in Korea, they had the army in the stands, and they had these cheers that were all planned out as they did. And they were quite amusing if you were in their buildings and there was nobody really caring what was going on in the games, but they were doing these synchronized cheer things. The first thing I watched at these Olympics, because they're doing this now, I don't really understand why. They start the Olympics before the Olympic opening ceremony goes on. And so they had team figure skating, which is a dumb event to begin with, on before the game started. And so I'm watching, and whoever the first skater I see, it's a pairs group. They do a lovely routine and throws her, and she lands perfectly. And there's no sound. There is not that applause, which is, what you get in figure skating is you hold your breath, and then the person does their jump and they land. And it's like you exhale and you applaud. And it's part of the beauty and the danger and all the things that make figure skating so attractive. But when there was no one in the stands, I thought, I don't want to watch this. Yeah. And I turned channels. It took away my excitement for what was, it was team figure skating. It didn't take much excitement. But to watch an event where there is no noise, to watch that Canada-US hockey game, not the gold medal game with the women, I'm talking the one in the round robin with the men. Mm-hmm. It's just, it didn't have it. There was no, as you said, John, there's no energy. And when you lack energy, that would be like watching a movie without a soundtrack. If you took that soundtrack out of any movie, it would be terrible.
Did CBC fill with fake crowd noise at all, John?
No. They took all the sound from the host broadcaster, and they were 65 microphones all over the ice, and you could hear every chirp, and you could hear every skate blade and every stick, but certainly there was no amplified sound of
should they have, because it happened in hockey, it happened in the NHL.
I think they went away from it at a certain point too. I think they realized that how the artifice, and some networks during that bubble year said we want it, and some didn't. And I think that in the end, the ones that didn't do it were greeted with much more positives you could have without any people in the building. I just think that, I wonder if now there's finally an appreciation in every sport at every level for what a crowd brings to an event. And, for the longest time, the Olympics have always said, well, we're theater sport. So much money is driven by television. So much money is driven by anything but ticket sales. But now I think we have a new appreciation for having people in the buildings, even if it's not 20,000 people, even if it's 8,000 or 9,000 people, it certainly would be better.
The mistake that the hockey countries made is, instead of piping in sound, they should have just mic'd up Rennie Fassel, the former head of the IIHF, to get his comments on the state of hockey as it was being played. Sitting beside his buddy Putin, and that would have been amusing. But you talk about pro football is the TV sport. It is made for television. It is the best TV sport there is in the world.
That's because it sold to TV.
But
it stops when it stops when TV wants to stop. It starts when TV wants to start. It does everything that TV wants to do.
And how many crowd shots do you see in a game? Tons. How many crowd shots do you see in a Blue Jay game? Tons. Like, the crowd is very important to the vision and the part of what makes sport great.
Well, we are heading back towards the days, at least in
hope
this
so.
country, where we're going to see full stadia and arenas, we assume, in the very near future. America has essentially been there for a long period of time.
Mhm.
Have you attended any sporting events while you've been in Florida, or have you been abstaining?
I have been abstaining, and it's been very difficult to abstain. That may have to do with partly my marriage and partly my children. But the Florida Panthers, by the way, are the best show in hockey right now. Maybe the best team in the NHL this season. And they're about 20 minutes from where I am here. And it's taken a lot of energy and whatever else to not go to those games because I really wanted to.
Are they getting any notice down there right now, Steve? Are people paying attention?
You wouldn't know they exist, John. I subscribe to the local Fort Lauderdale paper. They don't cover the Panthers. Like they do not
At
have,
all?
They do not have a beat guy who covers the team. What you get is a game story a day late. If it's a Wednesday night game, you'll get it in Friday's paper, and it's the wire story of that game.
How does that compare to the Heat?
The Heat has pages upon pages, and the Dolphins have pages upon pages. It's like, we know people don't care, so we've just decided to pack it in, which I guess the online people, I think even the Athletic let their Florida Panthers person go. It's a tough sell, and it's terrible because this is a team who can win the Stanley Cup. I mean, they are that good.
Yeah.
What's attendance like, guys?
It looks like it's always looked here. When I've gone to the games here, the upper bowl is always full, and the lower bowl, where the more expensive seats are, is always half empty. And even for Leaf games and Canadians games, which are the big draws here, they do better with those games, but there's still tickets available. At the place I play golf down here, they sell coupons. A $28 coupon gets you a ticket to a Florida Panthers game and parking. So you can essentially go to the game and park for what you pay for parking to go to a Leaf game.
I wonder if I can negotiate to get a hot dog too. I'd like to get a hot dog too.
I bet you they have deals where you get popcorn and dogs. There's all kinds of little promotions that way. I feel terrible for the players and for the people running this thing, because it's just, I don't know if the places, if this area has given up on hockey and the Panthers, and they have a very specific following, or if I don't know what it is. But obviously, whatever numbers the newspaper is using to determine how it does its coverage, it's determined they're no longer worth covering, and I presume they'll start up again when playoffs begin.
And you watch. There is going to be discussion, if there hasn't been already, discussion about getting them a new arena closer to where you live in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah. That's going to be the next discussion. Is we need to find a way, because right now they're at the western edge of civilized South Florida, close to the Everglades, and people think it's too far to go.
Well, if you live in Miami, there's no way of getting there easily. Right. If you live in Fort Lauderdale, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And so it's a half an hour drive if you're Fort Lauderdale. If you're Miami, it's at least an hour, I think. And there's no convenient way in. There's no convenient way out. It's kind of like what they did in Cleveland. In most cases, those out-of-town arenas have been disasters. Once in a blue moon, a Foxborough and football works. But most of the time, what we're seeing almost everywhere now are downtown arenas and downtown stadiums. And that seems to be, you look at Sky Dome, or whatever we call it now, Rogers Center now. Look at that area now. Look at what it was when they built that place. I mean, there was a stadium and nothing else there. And all of it, now there's hotels and restaurants and bars and all kinds of stuff, condos everywhere. And it's a going concern, that area. If you had put that place in, I don't know, Woodbridge.
Don't say Downsview. Don't say Downsview.
Okay, Woodbridge. Would it have grown in the same way? I highly doubt it.
Well, I mean, hockey pucks are always going to make the excuse that, the arena location is the reason why they don't draw. But I think there's plenty of evidence that if you move the arena in South Florida, there's no guarantee that the place would be full. What there is evidence of is there is no interest in hockey and no infrastructure promoting the interest in hockey, and specifically media interest. And you can't buy better publicity than an independent media. You can spend all the dollars you want to try and lure people to the arena, but the validity of a sport comes from the media interest, because they are the barometer by which the fan interest is judged.
No, you're absolutely, you're bang on. And it's one of the real frustrations is you look across the state at Tampa and say, well, why can't we have what Tampa has? Now, Tampa has one more, but and Tampa and Florida actually played for the first time in the playoffs in order to get some of that media attention you're talking about last year, Bob. So there's a good possibility that they will meet in the second round of the playoffs, and you have to hope, and maybe it's a pipe dream, but you have to hope that there will be enough following in South Florida for a Tampa Bay, Florida playoff series that could ignite that extra fan base. Because in many ways, it's just, we're talking about how you ignite viewership and fan base. It's no different than Canadian soccer. We're talking about how do you do it? What do you create? And a Florida Tampa playoff series just might be that that medicine that they require.
Yeah, but as Stevie just said, a major newspaper is not even covering the team.
I don't believe the Miami Herald covers them either, to be honest.
No, they don't. They don't.
But what would be, John, what would be even a bigger draw, in my view? A Toronto-Florida playoff series.
Only for people in Toronto.
No, there are so many people down here who would come down for those games, would fill up the seats that they normally don't sell.
But then they go home, Steve. Then they go home to Toronto.
There's no lasting impression.
Yeah.
Here's what happens today that didn't happen in earlier years in our careers. When I write something for a newspaper, within a day, they know how many hits it has online. They know how long someone was engaged in the story. Like, did they take 5 minutes? Did they take 10 minutes? How long are they on this? What clearly has been determined by the two newspapers here is that they don't get enough attention, hits, engagement, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's why we don't cover, for example, the Toronto Marlies. We don't cover much about the Toronto Rock because we don't get anything for it. And in this case down here, obviously the Dolphins are the big thing. They get all the attention. The Heat are next. They're next. The university goes after that. The state universities go after that. The high schools go after that. And
then the baseball team.
Yeah, baseball team, which I haven't seen anything on the baseball team, but baseball is locked out, as we all know. But you think about it, they must get no clicks. Like, they must get no clicks at all. And I hate it's a terrible world to say in. This is a world where clicks count.
That's why you need Florida versus Florida. That's why you need a Florida state championship.
What, in hockey?
Yeah. Those two teams playing each other. Tampa versus Florida.
It's a blip, John. The whole point here is that that would be a blip. There's no guarantee, and probably I would bet you that it would have negligible impact on increasing the audience in South Florida.
We shall see.
Well, maybe we will. We got to go. Stevie, stay safe. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you very much. Enjoy it as always.
And we'll talk when you get back. Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun from Florida. We'll come back and wrap it after these messages. So thanks to Simmons for being with us. Wish him a safe trip back. Hope they let him across the border with that scraggly beard of his.
Well, he looks like Mandy Patinkin. So,
well, you should at least trim your beard. If you're going to have one, that's fine. But you should keep it neat and tidy. Well, you do.
Thank you, Robert.
Now, mine is so short, it doesn't even really look like a beard. It's just like peach fuzz. But I look after it. I take care of it. Simmons looks like he just crawled out of a ditch. In any event.
Friedman.
I'm sorry?
Don't you remember Elliott during the?
Oh,
during the,
that was ridiculous.
yes. I
Well,
know.
and Grange too.
Oh, Grange, maybe the worst. He looked like a guy under the Bloor Street Viaduct.
It's exactly right. Like the guys under the Bloor Street Viaduct don't shave because A, they don't care, and B, they don't probably have anything to cut it with, and certainly can't afford to go to a barber. These are reasonably well-adjusted, intelligent people who
Well
lost
paid.
their minds with their beards. I don't understand it.
Yeah. You shave every day, every second day, or what do you do?
Every 2 days,
Yeah.
sometimes every 3. Just depends.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you can't tell the difference. I mean, I don't
Oh,
remember when I shaved last.
I was debating whether to shave mine off.
Well, go ahead. It'll grow back, you know.
What?
That's the one thing about shaving off your beard, you know. If you feel you made a mistake, wait a few days. Your Toronto Maple Leafs,
Not mine, yours.
they're not mine by any stretch of the
Oh,
imagination.
you love them. You're a we decided
I am
yesterday you're a
not-
homer.
I am not a Maple Leaf fan. I am not a homer. And as you know, I care little about hockey. And I watched almost none of the game last night because, of course, I was
Oh.
engrossed in the soccer game.
The 6-year-old soccer game.
Which should tell you how much I care
Oh.
about the Toronto Maple Leafs.
You probably at least you didn't try to gamble on the soccer game.
Well, I would have because I remembered what the score was actually.
Oh.
If I could find a bookmaker that's stupid.
Oh, I have a story. I have a story about something like that one day. I have to tell. Remind me to tell it.
Well, we don't have
Boxing.
enough time today because I know your
No,
stories
boxing.
are long and boring.
Long, yes. But anyway,
And
so
boring.
how about the Maple Leafs? The Maple Leafs losing Montreal last night, and everybody in the Leafs are going to make the playoffs. Montreal's going to be out, and more people in Montreal are more satisfied with their team right now than Maple Leaf fans are with theirs. How's that?
Well, typical Montreal fans, you know, who quickly erased the first 50 games of the regular season or whatever it was.
Oh, 3 in a row, Bob.
And now they've won 3 in a row and they think, well, okay, so the magic is back. And who knows, maybe it is. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, this Maple Leaf team, if you're a Leaf
getting
fan,
nervous, aren't you? You're getting nervous.
you should be getting nervous.
Yeah.
There's holes here. There's warts in this team. The goaltending was spectacular with Campbell at the beginning of the year, and a lot of people thought this was a great team.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good team that got great goaltending. Now they're not getting great goaltending every night, and suddenly there's warts.
You know, Jack Campbell turned down an offer from the Maple Leafs early in the season for a renewal, an extension.
Maybe he should have taken it.
Yeah, makes you wonder because I think they're going to wait now. Look at the free agent market this summer.
We got to get out of here. We thank you for watching or listening, and we'll look forward to having you back tomorrow. For John Shannon, Bob McCowan.